In the aftermath of October 7th, the president of Harvard came under fire, the former president of Harvard, we should say, Claudine Gay. We can put the first element up on the screen. She published a letter yesterday resigning from her post atop Harvard. She was the first Black female president of Harvard. She, in the aftermath of October 7th, was called before Congress essentially to respond to allegations that Harvard had not been as harsh on these speech questions that pertain to pro-Palestinian students versus pro-Israel students. And Republicans grilled Claudine Gay. They grilled the presidents of Penn, and it was MIT. Yeah, the president of Penn resigned right away afterwards. And Claudine Gay, in the meanwhile,
MIT, yeah.
So Claudine Gay, meanwhile, got hit with a ton of allegations of plagiarism that originated actually from Counterpoint's guest Chris Rufo and Aaron Sibarium, who's an excellent reporter over at the Washington Free Beacon.
Although they were bouncing around the internet, I had read, as part of kind of an anti-DEI attack on Gay. Like, people were accusing her of being unqualified and boosted just because she was a Black woman.
So she,
and
yes.
And just bouncing around on like racist 4chan things before it kind of migrated into the discourse.
Yeah.
By Rufo really seems to be, I don't know how much credit he gets, like if he was the one that first surfaced them, if he gave them the New York Post or what.
He did follow up on tips, and the same with Sibarium, that as soon as, so basically this is why it's related to October 7th, even though these are plagiarism allegations throughout the course of her career, is that they started getting tips. Rufo and Sibarium started getting tips because people were so pissed off about her testimony in front of Congress, in which she kind of copped to this legalese, or resorted to this legalese to defend Harvard's speech policies. And that's where this is, there's so many different conversations happening in this one conversation alone that you have to sort of disentangle these things, which is, I think the speech policy is absolutely correct. Like, I think the speech policy that she was defending is absolutely correct. And on the other hand, I think that she was using this awful, like, HR language to mask hypocritical approaches to speech. So conservative students are obviously punished and their speech is restricted disproportionately in different cases. And so Claudine Gay gets brought before Congress and has no sense of moral clarity, and just is incapable of defending with any real vigor and principle her position on free speech. It just was a circus.
To me, it was a bad answer that given by both Penn and Harvard, because Elise Stefanik said, yes or no question, can calling for the genocide of Jews get you caught up in the disciplinary process at your college? I think she asked for a yes or no answer. Just say yes.
Right.
Because there certainly are situations where it could.
Right.
And then you say yes. Of course, each individual case depends on the context. What words were used and in what context.
Yeah.
And because there was a famous case of a professor at Penn who he said, all I want for Christmas is white genocide.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Just a joke. People.
Or was he was at Drexel?
Maybe it was Drexel, Philadelphia. He was a joke. But if you say that there's a strict no context rule, he's done. Mm-hmm. And everybody's telling an obvious joke, is done if context can't be allowed. But they just should have just said yes. And then you force Stefanik then to kind of get into the weeds, which is what the MIT president did. She said, well, I haven't heard anybody saying that on campus. What are you talking about? And Stefanik came back with, well, there have been people who've chanted intifada, which is Arabic for the word uprising.
Right.
And at that point, you're like, well, I'd have to see a lot of context in order to say that, I understand why people receive that in a violent fashion, because the second intifada was quite violent. There were suicide bombings involved. But the word intifada just means uprising. There's a news outlet that covers Israel-Palestine called Electronic Intifada.
Yeah.
Like, just is reading that calling for genocide? No, of course not.
And she's kept her job
And she has
Sally
so far
Kornbluth.
kept her job,
Yes,
but they're
so
coming for her next. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, yeah, no. Let's put this up on the screen so we can see the examples of plagiarism. The Free Beacon actually made this very handy illustration where you can see highlighted text between Claudine Gay's work. She's a political scientist. I think she studied economics at Stanford and taught. She's taught political science for a while, and you can just see the text being highlighted. That's the same. We can put the next element up as well now too. You could go to the Free Beacon website to read all of these examples, and you can see them in Rufo's work as well. It's also worth noting the Associated Press headline just this morning. This is one of the best that I've ever seen among bad Associated Press headlines. Harvard's president resignation highlights new conservative weapon against colleges, plagiarism.
Yes.
Again, this is what Jonathan Chait already yesterday in New York Magazine was accusing Rufo of weaponizing, quote, high standards of excellence, something like that. One of those phrases, like exceptional standards or standards of excellence, something to that degree, which is just stop, pause, and listen to yourself. That's a weird way to talk about what happened, because there are a lot of students at Harvard who looked at Claudine Gay and said, if I did what you did here, and a lot of it was not citing works that she later added citations to. Harvard tried to kind of wiggle out of this and not, punish her at all. But when you have students saying, listen, I would be kicked out of Harvard and my career would be severely affected if I had done all of these things. And the president, I'm to hear the president is keeping her job with no punishments whatsoever. She just has to add citations. I feel like that's where it became most untenable. On the other hand, the Harvard Corporation, which is this sort of secretive corporation that runs Harvard, has apparently been taking the backlash from people like Bill Ackman really seriously. And Li Fang actually found an example. First, let's put B4 up on the screen. This is Elise Stefanik taking a little bit of a victory lap. B4, it's a tweet from Elise Stefanik saying, 2 down, Harvard knows that this long overdue forced resignation of the anti-Semitic plagiarist president is just the beginning of what will be the greatest scandal of any college or university in history.
Oh,
there
get
we
over
have
yourself.
There we have the inflation of the term anti-Semitic, quite an inflation of anti-Semitic. And let's put up this Li Fang tweet where he's responding to, I believe this is the next element, Bill Ackman saying, next up, MIT, to the point that Ryan made. And Lee responded, now they're going after yet another university president, MIT, Sally Kornbluth, who also declined to censor pro-Palestinian student speech. They're making it very clear this is about enforcing pro-Israel dogma, nothing else. So Ryan, that's to the point you made, that it's not stopping with Claudine Gay.
Right, and obviously this wasn't about plagiarism, which then makes a lot of her defenders look bad because everybody knows this is not about plagiarism. Then when they find these very solid examples of what everybody understands to be plagiarism, her defenders have to defend the plagiarism because they're defending the meta fight rather than that one. Rather than, to me, you just have to be like, look, it's true that you would not have been, this plagiarism would not have been uncovered if not for the kind of witch hunt that came out of that hearing. Like they came for you, trying to get you fired, and they found this pretext to get you fired. However, the pretext is legitimate. You're bust. Sorry.
Right. Exactly.
Too bad. Like, you shouldn't have plagiarized. There are a lot of academics who are in academics to get to other positions, such as president of a university.
Right.
And you have to, in order to get there, you have to get your PhD and you have to be published in respectable journals. Those are boxes that you have to check. And for those academics, they're kind of just checking those boxes while they're working the politics and getting, and that's fine. If you want to be president of Harvard, that's a cool ambition. I'm not saying everybody has to be like just in the stacks of books at the library.
You could be next.
But that's right. Throw my
You got Harvard colors on your tie.
I suggested Rashid Khalidi, author of 100 Years' War, a great Palestinian-American scholar, as the next president of Harvard. Because Harvard originally said, you know what, we probably would get rid of President Gay based on these initial plagiarism allegations, but it will look like we're caving to Bill Ackman and the rest of this mob.
Yeah, and Chris Rufo.
And Rufo. We don't want to do that. So they stuck by her for a while.
Right.
But then the plagiarism allegations were just too much. And so if they really want to get back at Rufo and Ackman, Rashid Khalidi for Harvard president.
Double down, further left. Yeah. They also, this is from the New York Times. They say initially faculty reaction was mixed, with some saying the charges were serious and other calling the examples minor, including some of the people that were plagiarized from. Professors from both camps questioned the seemingly ideological nature of the effort to publicize them. But
well, clearly ideological.
Yeah. But as more allegations surfaced, faculty support for Dr. Gay began to erode, particularly as questions arose about what procedures the corporation, which normally has no involvement in scholarly matters, had used to investigate. So people were actually dissatisfied with the nature of the investigation, which they thought was sort of a charade and a rubber stamp. And that is all sort of bubbling. And that's where Claudine Gay, who, by the way, this is the shortest tenure for any president of Harvard since 1636, which is when Harvard was founded. She was the first Black president and the second woman ever to lead Harvard University. So you can see where Harvard was reluctant to part ways with her, anticipating already charges of racism. Claudine Gay's resignation letter is in no ways an apology for the plagiarism. She defends her work. She does not apologize for anything and says this is. Some people have said she blames racism for what happened to her. I think she just kind of invokes it.
I mean,
obviously,
the initial allegations of plagiarism were surfaced by people who were upset that a Black woman was made president of Harvard.
You're talking about what allegedly was on 4chan.
Back in those 4chan threads or whatever. Now, they were surfaced because she plagiarized.
And clearly
they were able to surface them because she was plagiarized. But yes, and she's not wrong that the initial people who found them and then leaked them and surfaced them to Rufo and the other folks were animated by anger at the fact that they thought this Black woman didn't deserve to be president of Harvard. Like that, she's not wrong about that.
I think there's always, if you're a Black woman in America and you're in a position in a high profile position, there's always going to be a racialized element.
But you also have to, because you know that, you can't be that sloppy with your work. Clearly what she was doing is all of these areas were like kind of, it's what you would call the B matter of your articles, where you're just kind of summarizing. And it's so, like, I'm glad I'm not an academic because some of it's so boring. Like, you have to, like, summarize all of this prior research that's done before you get to your own original research.
Yeah. So
your literal job is to take other people's work, summarize it, cite it, and so that people, like, have the context for what your original contribution is coming afterwards. And so in those places where she's summarizing what other people's work is, she's just copying and pasting lines, dropping them into her own work, changing them a little bit, usually citing where she got it from, but sometimes not citing.
Well, apparently 40 plus times we're in that ballpark.
Yeah, and so then you're busted. You have to be more careful about how you do it. The whole thing is copying, because you're just reiterating what people have previously said. And so I understand why some academics are like, this is not serious because this is just the grunt work. This is the busy work of academia rather than the original work that we're supposed to be focused on. But that's look, they're the ones that set this stupid framework up. They live by it and die by it.
It reminds me of, in a weird way, a lot of what happens on the right with Donald Trump, which is that you are completely correct that the people coming after Donald Trump for X, Y, and Z have ulterior motives.
Right. Yes, they're not really just
the broken
only
clock,
concerned
however,
about
is
classified information.
Right. Yes. And then the broken
like payoffs to porn stars.
Absolutely. Yes. And then still the broken clock is right twice a day, and sometimes it's like he clearly is seriously being accused of doing something that is clearly wrong.
Yeah. Al Capone did cheat on his taxes.
Al Capone did cheat. And that is the moral of the story, really. Al
Capone did cheat. Although he had no choice, because you can't, like, honestly file a criminal enterprise with the IRS. So he was in a catch-22.
A little bit of a pickle, yeah.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.